All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the episode 2 of the Knockaholics podcast. I'm here with my co-host, JAYCOB Zepeda, my younger brother, and I'm here with my father, Mike Zepeda, who is the #1 Impala reseller in the country. So we're excited. We're about to drop some knowledge on you guys today. He's an entrepreneur. That's where we learned a lot of our entrepreneur stuff. We've learned all kinds of different sales tips and techniques and tactics and stuff like that. So we're going to get right into that. So you want to give us a little bit of background on yourself, Dad? What do you do?
Yes, well, first and foremost, I just want to thank you guys for having me here. It's definitely a pleasure, and it's very special to me because you guys are my 2 sons, and just seeing you guys as young entrepreneur men and just growing and growing is just extremely enjoyable as a father.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, and so one of the things we like to talk about here is like what it takes to be successful. Obviously, you've dealt through all kinds of different adversity in your life, and you've been through so much, and you always seem to float back to the top. What's some like hard stuff that you've experienced in your life that you've had to get through to like get you to where you need to be?
So, first and foremost, I was, obviously Grandma Karina, she was really young when she had me. And, so I'm thinking back of my childhood, and I definitely had a childhood that I don't think most kids would have had. I experienced a lot of stuff. I was around a lot of selling drugs, drug raids. I experienced overdoses. I had a stepfather that was a heroin addict. So, there was moments where he'd have friends or different things. I was the oldest, so I always looked after my brother and sister, and I always felt like a little father role. Mm-hmm. And so I think that helped me mature as a young age. But the biggest thing that it did for me is it opened my eyes because I knew my stepfather was a really good man, and I just seen how those drugs controlled him. So I knew at an early age that I would never allow anything to control me like that. Mm-hmm. So I have those memories as a kid. Just a lot of different things. I just knew that I was the type of person that if anybody ever hurt my feelings or if anybody ever upset me, I would get that anger and exert it to positive energy. Meaning when I sold cars, like when I was in trouble, when I was upset, I would sell the most cars. Mm-hmm. Because you have 2 ways to look at it. You're either going to pout like, oh, this place sucks, this, or you're going to get upset and do something about it. Yeah. And if you do something about it that way, guess what? You get positive results and you're going to make things better. And I just have noticed a lot of people don't do that. If you're hurt, if you're in a situation where something upsets you, there's energy built up. And if you use that in a positive way, sky's the limit.
Fueling your fire.
Exactly. Putting logs in your fire.
It reminds me of that video. I don't know if you've ever seen with Tom Brady, where they're like doing an interview and he's like, what did they say about me? He's like, I'm looking to make an enemy. He goes, I wasn't friends with all the other players on the other team. He's like, what did they say about me? They said what? And like he was able to use that fuel when he got pissed off. Not a lot of people can do that. Sometimes people will let anger and they'll have a bad attitude. And one thing that in our industry is like sales is a transfer of energy. We said it on the last podcast. People feel your emotions and stuff like that. And a lot of times people will let that emotion be negative, and then they might get snappy with customers and things like that. But you were able to use that as a positive. One of the things we like to talk about here is like what it takes to be successful. Obviously, you've dealt through all kinds of different adversity in your life, and you've been through so much, and you always seem to float back to the top. What's some like hard stuff that you've experienced in your life that you've had to get through to like get you to where you need to be?
Yeah. In my life, I've had a little bit of a different path than most people. I've made it to the top, lost everything, made it to the top, lost everything 3 times. So I've definitely dealt with a lot of adversity, but I think the biggest thing is you got to have something inside you. You got to have that burning desire. You got to have something, that why. Mm-hmm. And for me, what motivated me is I had children, I had a family, and that why was huge. So without even thinking about it, I just made it happen.
And how old were you when you got into sales? Because you had me when you were pretty young. You were 17 years old.
I was 17 years old.
We're getting raised together.
Yeah. Baby having a baby. 17 years old, and I realized real quick that I had somebody that depended on me. You look at a little baby and you're like, this baby needs me. It's definitely a different phase. I think I got into the car business right at like 20 years old. 19, 20 years old is when I started. And at the time I was working in this production job at C&D Zodiac, and I got fired for the first time. And not that I didn't do an exceptional job, I took advantage of the situation and I had to learn early, and I got fired. So I was looking obviously for another job, and I had a very good friend of mine who was in the same situation, Isaias, who you know. And I had seen an ad, and it was like, I don't remember the exact words, but it's like, if you're enthusiastic, you enjoy talking to people, you're confident, whatever the description was, he was like, this is you. And I was like, I'm not going to sell cars. Anyways, make a long story short, there was such few jobs available, I'm applying. And that's how I got, the first taste of it.
Okay. So 20 years old, you got fired from your job. You're looking for something different. Kind of give us like that mindset going into there, because you obviously had me already at that time, right?
Correct.
You lost your job. What did you tell your woman at that time?
I just remember I had came home and I just said that I had lost my job, and obviously told her why. And
Right.
I had taken advantage, so it wasn't the best, but I just knew immediately I needed to jump back on the horse. And by meaning jump back on the horse is I'll find something else.
And you didn't have anyone like in your family really, from like what I remember, that was like pushing you to go above and beyond and to be great. Obviously our family wants, good for us. They want us to do well in life, but you didn't have like any like really positive role models or positive influences. Where did you like find that like, desire to want to even become better and not just get like an average job and, just do average things?
Yeah. I think I look back at my childhood, and, I was raised obviously, for the most part, single mom, without a dad, without a grandfather. There was no male role model figures. I was raised by women, which, hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
But I think as a little kid, Mikey, as a little boy, I always just wanted, as a little boy, I'm going to be in the NFL. And then I realized, okay, maybe I'm not big enough to be in the NFL, but I just always wanted big things.
Okay.
And so I never thought about it. I just believed it was going to happen. Just crazy, believed it was going to happen. And if you believe it's going to happen, it's going to happen.
Yeah, if the mind can conceive it, the body can achieve it. Belief is one of the most important things, And can you give us like a little bit of background, like as growing up and stuff like that? I know that you said that you're raised in like a single home, single mom for the most part, but just give us a little background. Like how you became, who Mike Zepeda is, and how you developed that personality and how you became enthusiastic. Because were you always enthusiastic when you were young? Were you always outgoing, or did that like develop as you got older?
I think like anything, it develops, but I definitely had some of it. I remember at a really young age, I spoke Spanish, so I started selling fireworks. And in California, the bottle rockets, all that kind of stuff, they're illegal, so they're like, exclusive.
Prime merchandise.
So I started selling fireworks, and I remember selling them at a high volume. I had a neighbor that had a garage full of fireworks, and I told him that I was going to make all those fireworks disappear in a week. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And of course I went to school. Hey, I got fireworks. Became the plug and wiped his garage out.
That's right.
So that was like the first rush where I made money, and it felt really good. It was my own money I had earned. And I think that was like the first taste. And then I I collected baseball cards. And in those days, cards were really valuable. Not that they aren't now, but they're not as popular. But I started wheeling and dealing and trading cards and buying cards. I remember being able to go to the swap meet with my grandmother, because I was this young kid that knew a lot about baseball cards. I think I would get like the vendors to feel sorry for me a little and give me a good deal. And then I'd go back to the baseball card shops in Santa Maria, and they would feel sorry for me and overpay for it a little bit. And I was able to make that little gap, whether it was $10, $12 a card. But when you're 9 or 10 years old, it's like, hey, I flipped it.
Yeah, we call that the empathy close.
Might have been the only one I knew at that time.
Yeah.
But that's a big part of it.
Okay. And then, a lot of people, especially as they're young, that get into sales, sometimes they do have, positive role models. Sometimes they don't. Usually the people, in my opinion, from what I experienced, usually some of the people that are the most successful have been through like the most adversity in their life. Can you go into a little bit of detail about some adversity that you experienced at a young age that kind of like lit a fire for you? If there's anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, I was, obviously Grandma Karina, she was really young when she had me. And, so I'm thinking back of my childhood, and I definitely had a childhood that I don't think most kids would have had. I experienced a lot of stuff. I was around a lot of selling drugs, drug raids. I experienced overdoses. I had a stepfather that was a heroin addict. So, there was moments where he'd have friends or different things. I was the oldest, so I always looked after my brother and sister, and I always felt like a little father role.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that helped me mature as a young age. But the biggest thing that it did for me is it opened my eyes, because I knew my stepfather was a really good man. And I just seen how those drugs controlled him. So I knew at an early age that I would never allow anything to control me like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I have those memories as a kid. Just a lot of different things. I just knew that I was the type of person that if anybody ever hurt my feelings or if anybody ever upset me, I would get that anger and exert it to positive energy. Meaning when I sold cars, like when I was in trouble, when I was upset, I would sell the most cars.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have two ways to look at it. You're either going to pout like, oh, this place sucks, this, or you're going to get upset and do something about it.
Yeah.
And if you do something about it that way, guess what? You get positive results and you're going to make things better. And I just have noticed a lot of people don't do that. If you're hurt, if you're in a situation where something upsets you, there's energy built up. And if you use that in a positive way, I mean, sky's the limit.
Fueling your fire.
Exactly. Putting logs in your fire.
It reminds me of that video. I don't know if you've ever seen with Tom Brady, where they're like doing an interview and he's like, what did they say about me? He's like, I'm looking to make an enemy. He goes, I wasn't friends with all the other players on the other team. He's like, what did they say about me? They said what? And like he was able to use that fuel when he got pissed off. Not a lot of people can do that. Sometimes people will let anger and they'll have a bad attitude. And one thing that in our industry is like sales is a transfer of energy. We said it on the last podcast. People feel your emotions and stuff like that. And a lot of times people will let that emotion be negative, and then they might get snappy with customers and things like that. But you were able to use that as a positive.
Exactly. And that's what I experienced as a young. And then, as I got older, I got into the car business, I think at like 19, 20 years old. And, before that, I had a different experience where I had got let go from a job. But getting into the car business was a business that I never thought I was going to get into. I didn't realize at that time I was a salesperson, even though I had done stuff in my past, like sold baseball cards. When I got into the car business, that was obviously the first job that I ever had that was commission paid. And I remember in training, I was afraid because I've always had the fear of not succeeding. And I was afraid because I remember I was in training with another gentleman named Mike Dyer, who's a pastor now, still a good friend of mine. We were in training together, and he was like one of those product knowledge, knew everything.
Yeah.
Ace the test, all that kind of stuff. And I wasn't acing the tests the same way. I mean, he was pretty much kicking my ass in training. But when they released us on the sales floor, I was able to talk to people, and I was able to build common ground with people. And immediately get people to like you, trust you, and respect you. That's something that you can definitely work on all the time and get better at. But if you're born with a little something extra, how I always tell you the secret sauce?
Yep.
And I always have believed that I've had the secret sauce. So I just felt like I could relate to everybody. And that was the beginning. And I was able to earn a lot of people's business because they got a good vibe from me. And I was able to get them to like me, trust me, and respect me.
Do you feel like it's more important for people to like vibe with you rather than being the product specialist and stuff like that? Because both are important, obviously.
Obviously, both are important. You got to definitely know your product and be knowledgeable. But I absolutely think that vibing with people, I think you sell more than the product. The product's important, but it's not the most important thing. I think that the person in the sale is the most important thing. Now, don't get me wrong. There's going to be times like they're going to be, Mikey, you're absolutely amazing, but I've decided that I want this.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense. And any smart salesperson, you got to realize that you're never going to earn everybody's business. But if I earn a high percentage of their business, you're going to do well. You know, the more you learn, the more you earn. The more you sell, the more you earn.
If you're green, you're growing. If you're ripe, you're rotting.
Yes, absolutely.
That's positive. Another thing that I like to ask, you know, as in sales, for you to be able to do sales for 28 years, you've dealt with a lot of like adversity in the car business. You've dealt with a lot of different markets and things like that. What's one thing that you've always done that's able to like have you be that top performer? Because every dealership you've ever been to, you've always been the number one salesperson. Every dealership that you've gone to that has been underperforming, you've brought them up to the top,
Absolutely.
if not the number one. How do you do that? How do you do that? How do you come in with that mindset, even when you go into somewhere and it's completely negative? How do you change that? What's the mentality?
What I do is I just block all that negativity out, and I just absolutely believe that I'm going to turn that place around. Call it conceited, call it whatever you want, but I just absolutely believe that I'm that missing piece that'll complement everything. And so when I went into dealerships, a lot of times when you go into a dealership that's underachieving, you know, the first thing they want to do is get rid of the staff and replace them. I was able to go into dealerships with the same exact staff, maybe add one or two pieces like a chessboard and start to dominate and make people feel like they're something special. Because if you feel like you're special, guess what? You're going to perform like you're special. If you feel like you're just an average, like they don't really care about you, then that's the effort that you're going to get. So I think the biggest thing was just locking in with all the employees and getting out there and making it work. In younger days, I used to have a lot more out there on the lot. And then obviously as you continue to grow in the business, you're more working deals, more getting deals bought, and you don't have the time to be visiting customers on the lot. But if your salespeople believe in you and you can coach them and be like, hey, you can do this yourself, you'd be surprised on what they could pull off. And just knowing that just in case they have a sniper behind them, you know, that ain't going to let them out the door. They ain't leaving, period, but you're going to close them.
Absolutely. I remember like when I was selling cars with you, you'd be like, they're either going to buy or they're going to die. You know, the last thing you ever do is let them leave the lot, you know, without me talking to them at least, you know. And if
we don't mean literally. That was just the
mentality,
the mindset.
Yeah,
you either buy or die.
Absolutely. One thing I wanted to ask you, Pops, was can you speak a little bit about paradigm shift? Because it's something that you've taught us and it's something that we've seen happen in your life. And I remember the exact moment that it happened, but can you kind of go into that a little bit and how you changed from who you were to the man that you are now?
Correct.
That paradigm shift.
Yeah. I think that, you know, just maturity. I think that you just start to grow. And obviously we make mistakes. And if you make a mistake and you think about it, I mean, a fool's going to do it exactly the same again. So I just think that in my life, I can speak to my life, I just made decisions where it's like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to go full force and I'm not even going to think twice. Not everybody has that strong mindset, but if you have a strong mindset, that paradigm shift's not that hard. You just decide that you want to do it and you commit to it and you make it happen.
A lot of people, you know, like when they're going through a paradigm shift, you know, they don't see success overnight immediately. And most people, they get discouraged, you know, maybe a week or a month or 2 months. How do you keep that fire and stay locked in? Because I hear people say now that they're getting burnt out, but, you know, in reality, if you've been doing something for 28 years, that's more burnt out, not you doing something for 6 months and not having success.
Exactly.
How do you lock in like that and keep that fire?
You know what? You just got to continue to work on yourself and give yourself pep talks, man. Sometimes, you know, everybody's been in that situation where you're driving to work and you don't even want to be there. You don't want to go. You just got to find that something inner in you and just say, you know, I got to make it happen. And you'd be surprised. You know, like Grant Cardone said, 50% of success is just showing up. Even if you don't want to just show up. You know how many times I didn't want to go to work and I show up and I sell 4 cars?
How many times?
Probably like 20. I don't know exactly, but a bunch of times. But the point is that happens sometimes. I'd always, every time that I sold or anything, I'd always compare it to sports. You know, basketball teams. You know, I looked at my salespeople, like the starting 5. You know, I just play little games that are fun, and it's helped me succeed.
You transitioned from being in the car business for 28 years to now owning your own business. What's that been like for you, like in your lifestyle change, and then also too with that, what legacy do you want to leave behind?
So when I look back at my career, obviously 28 years is a long time to be in one line of work. You know, I sold cars for 28 years, but what I realized is that entire time I did well. I made great money. You know, they paid me for what I did, but 28 years I made other people rich.
Mm-hmm.
I never made myself. So that's something that had been heavy on my heart. In addition to that, you guys seen how much I worked growing up, how many wrestling tournaments I missed, how many baseball games, football games. Even if I got to go to the football game, I was in a tie and being blown up. I couldn't focus, you know? So it was just different. And I just think all that kind of stuff had built up, and I wanted to do something obviously for financial gain because I want to leave a lot behind on my children, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That's important to me. So I made the shift during the COVID time. I started selling an Impala here or there. Kind of went back to my roots, what I loved.
Yeah.
I knew that I wanted to still sell cars. Remember when I bought the 4Runner and stuff? I was already itching.
Yeah.
I knew that I wanted to sell cars, but I didn't want to sell cars and compete with dealerships. I wanted to do something exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to, you know, as a child, my favorite car was an Impala. So I ended up getting into that business, and I go, oh, I'm going to just do this for fun so I can have a better quality of life and more time off, because obviously being self-employed, you do what you want. But I'm so competitive that I started selling Impalas, and I start selling a few here or there. Then all of a sudden I want to get better and better. Then all of a sudden I want to be the best.
Yeah.
So there I go again. And I'm in a different situation where all my children are grown adults. You know, my partner, she's busy. She has a very demanding career. So I'm able to dial in and focus on this business. And I've been able to, you know, do the same exact thing that I did in the car business, build common ground and get people to like me, trust me, respect me, and send me their money.
Yeah, and for you to be able to build like a business through Instagram, that's pretty awesome and significant. You know, a lot of people, they get into something and, you know, like I said, after a couple months and they're kind of like over it because they're not getting the immediate success that they wanted. Obviously, you weren't killing it the same way that you were killing it when you transitioned from the car business, right? You sell
Correct.
more cars alone than some of the dealerships did by themselves. What lit that fire to keep doing the same thing?
Well, I could tell you this. It was a really tough 3 months. You know, there was times like, are you kidding? I left a $300,000 a year job. You know, I started thinking about that. I'm like, did I make the right decision? But, you know, my daughter Jocelyn was always like, you did. Honestly, what happens is I raised you guys. I motivated you guys growing up. And as you guys becoming all adults, and when I say you guys, I mean my children.
Yeah.
You know, I have 4 children, Michael, Jacob, Jocelyn, and my son, Jaden. I see you guys become entrepreneurs, and then you guys remotivate me. Mm-hmm. So it's like a beautiful thing. It's just like the Zepeda motivation. You know?
Yeah.
Because right now I'm at the point where you guys motivating me now.
Oh, there's massive accountability in this family, especially in the group chats and stuff like that.
Everyone gets called out.
Well, yes. See your numbers up, baby. Let's see those numbers.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, they like to talk about their success. Success is super important, but a lot of times people want to hear about your failures as well. Like, what's some of the things that you've gone through where you failed, and what did you do to like grow from it?
Gotcha. So I know another thing that I had did is obviously I had went through a divorce, your guys' mother. Mm. You know, I had been with, you know, from a high school sweetheart. I think I had got divorced at like 30 years old. You know, that was definitely a tough moment in my life. And in addition to that, I had got myself in trouble, had built a little empire and lost everything. You know, and I was able to rebuild that back up again. And I've done that like 3 times.
So that time that you're talking about, that was the first time, or was that the
second time? That was the
time?
First time.
Okay.
That was the first time.
And then what was the second time?
The second time was after I had got incarcerated, had went away. The second time I got out, and yeah, I ended up getting myself in trouble again after I had built myself back up and lost everything again.
So you got in trouble again, and then what about the third time?
And the third time again.
Okay.
So
third time's a charm.
yeah, everything ties into the same thing, and we won't get into that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very humbling experience, because I had went, Mike, you got to realize that I had went where I would literally walk into a dealership and they would be like, that's Mike Zepeda right there.
Yeah.
Impeccable reputation, everything. And then when I got myself in trouble, guess what? When somebody's at the absolute top and you have all these underachievers, that's their opportunity. Did you hear what happened? Did you hear? You know.
Yeah.
So, anyways, it was a humbling experience, and that was the first time that I had been embarrassed and humbled. And I'll tell you, it sucks, but it's the best thing for you, because it thickens your skin, you know, and it sets you up for the long term. So me being humbled and being embarrassed and having that happen to me, that motivated me. That motivated me to climb right back to the top again.
And I couldn't agree more with you, because once I got in trouble, like when I got in trouble in like 2020, exact same thing. I was embarrassed, humiliated. I lost everything. You know, God gives you humble pie.
Let me share a little story with you, okay? I had got out of prison. Before that, you guys remember, we had 2 Escalades. I had a crew cab GMC truck. I had a Lexus GS400. I had 4 really nice cars. And an Impala, but it wasn't that nice at that time.
That was a grandma's garage.
Okay. I got out. I did not own a car. Not one. I borrowed my Uncle Andy's little 86 Chevy Blazer to get to work. And I remember that I got invited to dinner, and I went, and it was like Ruben Gomez, Anthony Guerrero, a handful of my friends that I had worked with at Stowasser. And I remember pulling up in that Blazer and just feeling so like, man, like, what the hell's happened in my life?
Yeah.
You know, and of course they're all doing well. Everybody in the car biz, brand new Suburbans, new trucks. And I had hired and trained all these guys. But yet the boss had gotten, I was starting over, and I was under them. Yeah. And so I just stood quiet, and that just motivated the hell out of me.
Yeah, instead of licking your wounds, you use it as motivation and fuel. That's awesome. Fuel.
And it wasn't within 4, 5, 6 months, made it right back to the top.
And it's funny that happens, because, like even some of my friends that are like at, dealerships now, once I got in trouble, they were all doing really, really well. They had never got in trouble, never made really any mistakes like that. Obviously people make mistakes, but just to see all them killing it, crushing it. Some of them were GMs at dealerships, sales managers at dealerships. I never made it to a sales manager. Always like an assistant sales manager or a closer,
Correct.
One of the things that I've always been, one of my issues has been my mouth. And so sometimes it's gotten me in trouble as well, because it's never been for performance. It's always been either my mouth or, showing up late or doing things that, weren't ethical at the time. So it's really humbling. One thing I want to know too is, what's something that, people really don't know about you, Dad? I know obviously we know about you, but is there anything that no one really knows about you?
If you think about it, I kind of, like, in my hometown where I grew up, I have this reputation, and like, don't mess with that guy or this and that. But I'm the type of person that I keep my circle real small. So obviously you guys know me, and but I think that I have an amazing heart. Absolutely. I think I'm super kind-hearted, and not a lot of people know that. Maybe just my close friends and the people that are in my tight circle.
You look mean, that's why.
Yeah, but I'm a big teddy bear. My daughter knows.
Yeah. I always think of it like a lion. You have a lion heart, you love to take care of your entire pack, but then you're like, Papa Lion, so you don't want to mess with you either.
Yeah, I'll fight for the pride.
I know you said growing up you didn't have a lot of male role models in your life, although you told us many stories about your cousin Joaquin, and I just wanted to ask, like, how he influenced you and how he inspired you to be the man that you are today.
Yeah, my cousin Joaquin, now that I think back, he did play a big part. Obviously, I didn't have, dad, grandpa, none of that kind of stuff in my, household. But, I had a cousin. He's, rest in peace, he's passed away. But I had a cousin named Joaquin that was about 5, 6 years older than me. And this guy was a huge influence on me because not only was he a guy that on the streets was a really tough guy that was well respected, that wasn't afraid of anybody. He was just an absolute baller. And me being a kid, it was the first time I had really seen an Impala. He had an Impala just like the one on Boys in the Hood. Exactly. He seen that movie and built that car 2 months later.
Yeah.
Money, no object. I want a twin to that one. And that was where I grew to love Impalas the first time. Funny how it comes back, and now I'm one of the biggest, if not the biggest in the country.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I wish he could see how many Impalas I have.
He's
now.
looking down right now. He knows.
Yeah. But he just played a major influence on me. He was a baller. And what I mean by baller is this guy was just made money. You know, he didn't work a traditional job. He did whatever. And just so many memories, you know. He would like take me school shopping and do something like I've never seen. Like we would look at shoes, and back in the early 90s, Jordans were like $150. And if you think about it, that's like $500-600 nowadays.
Yeah.
And he would be like, hey, we want on the whole wall, the whole display, every one of them in a size 10.5 for him and for me. He would be like, for me and my little primo.
Yeah.
Get me a 10.5 and him a 9.5.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it costs, but he just, you know, he would just handle it. He was just always really good to me and just made me believe in myself. He used to call me Young Rooster. And he's the one that opened my eyes, and he put me in positions and make me uncomfortable and made me fight a few times. Not a few times, a whole lot of times. But he made me believe in myself. And he opened my eyes and made me feel special. And that's one thing that Joaquin did, is he made me feel special, and he made me feel like I wasn't average.
Mm-hmm. Is that something that you feel like you were able to do with your guys, is make them feel special?
Absolutely. Now that I think about it, yeah. I mean, that's the person that originally from the beginning made me feel special.
You said that's like one key ingredient that you had. You know what I mean? When I asked you about going into underperforming dealerships, you're like, it's making people feel special. So that's where that comes from.
If you think about it, great coaches build great relationships with their players. They know how to utilize their players. Every player has skills. Everybody has talents. You go into you guys are in solar. Obviously, my experience was car business. You go into a dealership, every single salesperson has talents. Right. Okay? We just got to figure out what their talents are, and we're going to maximize those talents. You know, the way I look at it is, you know what, you might be good at grabbing every single customer, not letting them leave. You maybe not that good at closing, but you're the best at keeping people here. Yeah. You know, you are lazy, you never get ups, but you are the best at closing. Yeah. You know, bring it to me. So you try to fight. It's like playing chess. You got all these pieces and you're trying to win the game. You know, I may put a pawn out there. You know, I'm saving my queen piece, you know? Yeah. So anyways, that's what great coaches do. And if I look at that, and that's why I always referred back to basketball, because there's a lot of similarities. You know, you're getting your ass kicked. You're going to make an adjustment to the squad. This guy's hot. He keeps hitting three-pointers. Guess what? You keep passing him the ball till he misses. Exactly. You know, somebody sold 3 cars in a row. I don't care who's up. You're getting the next customer.
Right. And momentum is so important. We talked about that on the podcast as well. You know how you always told me life's like a snowball. Can you touch real quick on like how big momentum has been for you and for your career? Yeah,
absolutely. So what I meant by telling you that life's like a snowball is you have to continue to do well for a period of time. You know, so say you jump into a business, you jump into solar and you start, you know, knocking on doors, you start doing this, you got a tiny little snowball. You know, and you do it for 6 months, you do it for a year, you continue to get better every single day. Whether it's 1% better a day, guess what? In a year, that's 365 1%. Yeah. You're going to get a hell of a lot better. You're going to elevate.
It's a J-Rob right there.
Yeah. I learned that from J-Rob, and guess what? I learned it from Rigetti Wrestling. I sent you guys to J-Rob, and you guys brought it home. And when I learned that, I was like, whew, I'm using that. That's going straight to my sales staff. So if I heard your guys' coaches say something that I liked, guess what? If you're green, you're growing. If you're ripe, you're rotting. I may be the best salesperson there is. If I hear something that's better than my clothes, then I'm going to use that. Yeah. I like that. I've hired brand new people that didn't even know how, and they said something. We're like, we're using that now.
That's some of the best people because they're they're not polluted. They don't know anything.
Exactly.
But let's get back to the momentum though. Like, how has momentum been super important for you in your career?
So momentum's been important because just like you guys know, when you have momentum going, you're rocking. So as momentum's going, you're going to continue to sell, continue to sell. It goes in spurts.
Mm-hmm.
I told you guys, sales come like grapes. They come in bunches. So if you have momentum, you're going to be, you're going to be hitting.
Yeah. And the reason why I'm even bringing this up is because I was the type of person that never had any momentum. Before I got into the industry that I'm in now, which is in the door-to-door space, I was in the car business. And I was the guy that would be bouncing from dealership to dealership to dealership to dealership. I've probably worked at like 10, 15 dealerships, in the short career that I had, which was like 7 years in the car business. But now that I've actually had that consistency and I've been with the same company for like 3 years, going on to 4 years, and I've been plugging away. And unfortunately, when I got in trouble, I was on house arrest for like a whole year and I wasn't able to go out. I wasn't able to be out past 10 p.m. And all that stuff that my dad had been preaching to me for all the years that I wasn't listening to started happening. It was like that paradigm shift, but I was forced into paradigm shift. It wasn't by choice, So it's just super important. And I love to hear, about the momentum because it's so, so true. For anyone out here that might not be having any momentum or any consistency in your life, you guys, this is where you really need to buckle down and you really need to lock in and find something. It may not be what you want to do for the rest of your life, but that's okay. In life, there's things that you got to do that you don't want to do. And that's one thing that my dad's always told me. Not everything's going to be your favorite part, but if you plug away and you stay persistent, or this is the quote I live by: if you're persistent, you can get it, but if you're consistent, you can keep it. And I was never consistent. I was always persistent, but I was never consistent. And another thing that we've been learning from one of our mentors, Andy Elliott, if you treat everything like it's the first day, there'll never be an end. Treat everything, whether it's a relationship, whether it's your career, whatever it is, you treat everything like it's the beginning and there'll never be an end.
That's awesome. That's powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
definitely.
I just think it's funny, a lot of people in their sales career, my dad's one of the best salespeople I know. He's bilingual. He's a stud. He's funny. He's charismatic. And he'll also tell people what they don't want to hear and then reel them right back in after he pisses them off. So a lot of people have fun, like, famous mentors like, Tony Robbins or Jim Rohn, which is one of my favorite, or, Andy Elliott or Taylor McCarthy, all these different people that they have, role models. Who are some of your role models? Who'd you look up to? We want to know.
Well, I could tell you this, like as a dad and as a family man, I always looked at Uncle Andy like as a mentor, like how to take care of my family. Now, is he an entrepreneur? No, I didn't. But the man loved his family. He's consistent. So that was like an example that I was able to see. Yeah, and I didn't know when you said that if you meant like, you mentioned, Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn, and then I mentioned Joaquin. They're complete different.
Right, but I'm just saying, like I said, a lot of people have, but you're different than most people, right?
Yeah.
Some people are born with it, some people aren't. You're not like everybody.
Gotcha. If I think back, like mentor, obviously I didn't have the ability to have like a dad, any of that kind of stuff. Me being in the car business, at least in my generation, it was Joe Verdi, then Grant Cardone. I wouldn't say they were mentors, but I respected their style and their abilities, and I tied some of their stuff into my style. And, growing up, my cousin Joaquin, like I had mentioned, was a mentor to me in a different way. He was able to open my eyes. For me personally, I didn't have like that one person, and I'm not saying that that's not the case, because I think it is very important to have a mentor. If you're going to have a mentor, you should mentor somebody that you want their lifestyle, you want what they've done, and set that as the bar. And if you set that as the bar, that's what you shoot for. Something as simple as like when I sold cars, I looked at every single salesperson and I was friends with all of them, but I would, in my brain, justify how I'm going to outsell every single one of them. Whether this guy's old, out of shape, I'm in way better shape, I have more endurance, he cannot outwork me. This guy's a great salesperson, he doesn't speak Spanish, I have that advantage, and I'll outwork him. Outwork is always, because I feel that if you take care of yourself, you're in shape, you're going to feel good. And I've heard you say this. If you feel good, you look good. And if you look good, you're going to perform good.
Yeah.
Just everything's good.
If you look good, you feel good. And when you feel good, you play good. And when you play good, they pay good.
Yeah, nice. See, he's added a remix to it.
Well, that's Deion Sanders, prime time. I just read his book, so that's someone that I look up to as well. I've heard obviously a lot of things about Deion Sanders.
Now, as far as sports mentors, Neon Deion was a special one. Man.
Yeah. And so you talk a lot about like your mentality and your mindset on like, your laser beam focused, and like you see someone and you're like, oh, I'm going to beat them. How important do you think it is to have like a positive mindset, or how important is mindset to you? It doesn't really necessarily have to be positive, but how important is mindset to you?
Mindset's everything, especially in sales. I used to always say, okay, you could be a mechanic and be in a bad mood and still replace an alternator. Mm-hmm. Okay, you could be in a bad mood and still replace brakes.
Right.
But you can't be in a bad mood and sell people, because they could feel it. If mindset is everything and attitude is everything, there's no different than me going into a dealership that used to sell 30 cars a month and have the exact same staff, maybe one or two additional pieces, and sell 100 cars a month. It's just a different mindset. It's believing we're going to do business. Driving to work every day, just knowing. I don't know how, but I definitely know I'm selling something today. You had the opportunity, both of you guys had the opportunity to work for me, and rarely did we ever have a day that we didn't sell a car. Very rare.
I don't think I remember it.
Yeah.
I'd still sell on his day off. I like working on his days off because. Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I enjoyed coming in and seeing you guys make deals with other managers.
Oh yeah.
They loved it. Dave was like, break me the deal.
Yeah, no, I like working with Dave. So you guys, that was the first part of the podcast, just kind of getting known to my dad. Second part, we're going to get right into like some sales stuff, some tips, some tricks, things that have really helped us get to the next level in our career.
The question I wanted to ask is, what advice, Pops, would you give to somebody who is looking to maybe make the transition to sales, or they just started sales, and what advice would you give to them?
So the advice that I would give, one of the tips that I would give somebody that's just starting in sales is, whenever you start something, you have a good positive mindset. You're excited about it. Try to do everything you possibly can to keep that mindset. Keep yourself green and surround yourself around good, positive people, mentors, coworkers, people that are succeeding and doing well. Mm-hmm. That's one thing. Another thing is just continue to get better a little bit every day. A lot of people want to rush right to the top, and it's amazing to get to the top quick. But if you build your foundation out of concrete and you do all the right things, in the long run, you're going to stand longer. Mm-hmm. And not only that, you're going to build your craft and your abilities. And no matter what you do, it's just going to go with you.
Yeah. It's kind of like how Jesus talks about, building your house on rock versus building it on sand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Think about it. Before solar, you guys had a solid sales foundation already.
Absolutely.
You didn't walk into solar not knowing. You guys both had a solid foundation. So when you have that foundation and that foundation's built, no matter what you do, whether you sell cars, whether you sell solar, whether you sell life insurance, your foundation's built. Mm-hmm. You can play ball. If you could play basketball in the NBA, you could play basketball in Europe, China, anywhere. Right. Basketball's basketball, and it's the same thing with selling. I would give you guys like little analogies, like you're a lion hunting in this jungle and you go to a different dealership. It's a different jungle, different animals. Yeah. I like to keep things fun.
Right.
I remember motivating salespeople, especially I used to love guys that like had one or two kids, family men. And I would tell them, you're like a bird, and I would give them a visual and I would tell them, you're like a bird and you got your little beautiful wife bird and your little babies right there. And I go, you're hunting for worms. I go, it's your job every day at this dealership to take some worms back to your nest.
Absolutely.
And I would see my sales guys on the lot with customers and I was like, they need worms. The customers wouldn't know what we're talking about, but the sales guy knew. I was like, it's your responsibility to take some worms and drop them off at that nest. And those little things motivate them.
Mm-hmm. We're hunters.
Yeah, we're hunters. I go wake up in the morning when your kids are asleep and look at them each before you go to work. That's all you need. You just look at their little faces and say, all right, it's time to perform.
What's like your mindset going into work and like your morning routine?
My morning routine, what I like to do is I like to get up early. I'm a coffee drinker.
Okay.
So I like to get up early, have a couple cups of coffee, start gathering my thoughts. Whether you're working from home or whether you're working in an office, it's a little bit different. But I think that you need a little bit of you time in the morning. A little bit of time just to gather your thoughts, figure out what you want to accomplish that day, what's most important. And there's nothing worse. Think about it. Like if you're prepared to go to work, if you wake up early, you prepare yourself, you feed yourself, whatever the case is, you're going to perform better. If you show up, you're starving, racing into work, had to get dressed in 2 minutes, it's just not the same.
Yeah. The preparation is super, super important. Another thing, what is some like, do you have any like, cool closing lines or things that you used to use to help like lock down deals, or what's like a tip that you can give someone, maybe like a little sales line that you can use? What's one of your favorite ones?
Something, just a simple one that works so many times is like, and what I experienced in the car business is people, what's the first thing they say? I want to think about it. And I would joke around, make it funny. I would be like, Mikey, think about it. You've been thinking about it, what, the last 5, 6, 7 years? No, I've been thinking about it for 2 years. Well, 2 years. I go, there comes a point where eventually you got to do it. Mm-hmm. And I would tie back into, it's just something simple, like the stop it close. Yeah. I want to think about it. You need to stop it, Mikey. You've been thinking about it. You love this car. You already mentioned it. Let's just go ahead and get it done for you. Mm-hmm. Just a little assumptive close, maybe stop it. Yeah, stop it works a lot of times. Give me a discount. Stop it. It's the way you say it. Give me a discount. Stop it, Betty. I already shared with you. It's priced extremely competitive. You would be surprised on what the stop it close does. And it works in a lot of different industries, not just the car business. Yeah. And I'm just sharing one. Yeah.
But your tonality on how you said it.
But you have to say it the right way. You can't be stop it. Yeah. That ain't going to work. Yeah.
You had to have some enthusiasm in it.
Do you think you could save me some more money on the payment? Stop it, JAYCOB. I already told you I got nothing else to give. And then you just continue to go.
Now, one thing that I do want to know as well, too.
If your wife's yelling at you, stop it. No,
see how much that one works. No.
I'm teasing.
One thing that I want to know is when you have a customer and let's just say, for instance, they walk in on the dealership and, because like, sometimes when people come like to the dealership, we're just talking about car business right now. When people come to the dealership, they have like this sense of entitlement and like they're rude to people. Like they don't want to work with anyone. How do you handle those types of people?
Okay. Those people that come into a dealership that have that sense of entitlement, they just have a wall put up. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it's a wall because maybe they've had a previous bad experience. Maybe they've purchased a car and they felt that they were taken advantage of, whatever the reason. Maybe their friends told them, you need to be careful. They just have a wall. A smart salesperson is just going to stay polite, stay respectful. And if you continue to help them, guess what? That wall gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And like I know, I remember a perfect example of a customer walking in saying they wanted to see a Nissan Murano. And he goes, I'm just letting you know I ain't buying today. As you walked out with him, you looked at me and winked your eye. And I swear within an hour, he was in finance. Yeah. You remember that?
No, I remember it. Yeah, that was at Santa Maria Nissan.
Yeah. I can give a little bit more advice too, because I truly think like for salespeople to perform at your peak, like if you have stability, like I think of like say like a single guy out there going out all the time and partying all the time and doing things like that versus like being in a relationship where you got one woman, stability, all that. You get dialed in and you could perform at a high level because you really only focus on your family and your career. Mm-hmm. And obviously God's number one, but I'm talking about 2 and 3. Mm-hmm. So like if young sales guys are like in a situation where they have a little family, stuff like that, I mean, you can, if you dial in and lock in on that, it just provides that stability and you can perform at a high level. Right. And not only that, if you have a good woman behind you, have a good support system. And I know a lot of times, like, one of the things that I've, like for me personally, and I'm just sharing this with you, maybe it'll be something that you would want to bring up. Are we being recorded right now?
You're good. Okay.
Yeah. One of the things that I know is like, for me personally, like I'm the type of person that I won't gamble my money. Mm-hmm. And it's not that I mean, something as simple as I put $100 in a slot machine and lose it, it like hurts me. Like, oh, the reason it hurts me is it's not the money. It's that I don't have control.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm the type that I'll gamble on my abilities. Like,
Yeah.
for example, in this business that I'm doing with Impalas, I'll go spend 85% of all our money on on all these cars, and it's a gamble because who would do that?
Yeah, but you're betting on
But
yourself.
I'm going to betting on myself because you know what? Those are the odds that I know I can control.
Mm-hmm.
And the beauty of sales is you control your paycheck. There's no other profession that controls it. You know, Christmas time coming, I better sell some extra cars.
Right.
You know, and you know you can make a fat paycheck. I shared the story when I bought you your first car, and I didn't even know how I was going to buy it. I just said, I'll take it. And that month, Jacob was 16 back then, but that month I just knew that I had to make an extra $4,000 or $5,000, and I did it. Boom, figured it out. So if you just have faith in your abilities, you'd be surprised on what happens, and I know both of you guys do.
So you guys, we just received a lot of value from the #1 Impala reseller in the nation, and he's actually my pops, so we're super grateful to have you on here. Is there any final thoughts that you have?
If I were to give any advice to new salespeople, no matter what industry you're in, is focus on creating good habits. And what I mean by that is if you go to work, if you continue to do things throughout the day that's leading to a sale, and you do that every single day, you'd be surprised. What does they say? It takes 21 days to create a habit. You do that for a month, your brain starts to program, and that's the way you perform. That's the way you work. Now, if you go to work and you're lazy and you make excuses and you're like, oh, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. You skip corners, then guess what? That becomes a habit. You create good habits and bad habits. Some people go, oh, you work so hard, Mike. I used to always get told, you work so hard, you don't stop. But I never felt like I was working hard. That's all I knew. And if you create those habits, the sky's the limit. And that's something that I did want to share with you guys because I think that's helped me immensely in my career.
Absolutely. It's like being where your feet are. That's one of what Andy Elliott says is, whether you're at work, you're there to work. If you're at home with your family, you're spending that time with your family and being intentional about it. And then it compounds over time, those good habits. And if you don't have good habits, those bad habits are going to compound over time.
Absolutely.
And then that's when you invert.
At the end of the day, we all got 24 hours in a day. Most people work like an 8-hour shift, 10-hour shift, just depending. If you go to a dealership or you're in the field knocking doors, if you're out for 8 hours, that doesn't mean that you worked for 8 hours. Did you sit on your phone? Were you scrolling through Instagram? Were you texting people? Were you checking emails? Were you doing things that weren't productive? Were you, leaving the lot or leaving the field and going getting food and things like that? When you get to the dealership or when you get to the field, you need to be intentional with your time. And like Jacob says, you got to be where your feet are, and creating those standards and creating those habits are super, super vital, especially for success in any type of sales industry. And just want to touch again on the consistency. So if you're consistently showing up, you're consistently doing things that are going to get you towards another sale. We call it ABCs, always be closing. If you're consistently being where your feet are, all that stuff is just going to trickle into like the compound effect, and it's going to create that snowball for you. So that's like the main thing that I think that we really got out of this was just being consistent, setting yourself proper standards, being where your feet are at, and just truly having a strong mindset.
A strong mindset and being happy. Realize that where you're at, it's not always greener on other sides.
Mm-hmm.
As a salesperson, I used to always say, you're like a palm tree. And we would relate to dealerships. Like you could look beautiful and they just yank you out of that lawn and slap you in another lawn. Guess what? It's going to take like a year for those roots to grow. So in any type of sales industry, it's the same way. It takes a while for your roots to grow. You shared with me that you've been with Fusion now. You have roots.
Right.
You're rooted. And guess what? Now you're going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. That tree's going to get stronger.
Right.
So as a salesperson, you're going to get stronger. If you keep tearing the roots out and planting them in different lawns, you're never going to have that snowball effect that we talk about.
Exactly. And that's one thing that I never really got to experience until like these last 3 years of my life is actually having that actual roots. So super blessed, super grateful. Thank you for all your time. Thank you for all the value. Love you, Dad.
Love you too.